Hi, everyone. As we work this week to really understand thesis and how a thesis will best serve a rhetorical analysis essay, I thought it might be helpful to look at the Quest 2 sample essay, and specifically to look at the thesis for this sample essay, and then how the thesis really provides clear structure and organization for the rest of the document. So let's take a look. In this sample essay, the last sentence of the introduction is the thesis for the essay. And I want you to notice a couple of things about this sentence as I read it out loud. Pay attention to what rhetorical strategies are identified in the thesis, and pay attention to the conclusion that the writer comes to about whether this source is successful at communicating or not successful at communicating. Alice attempts to persuade her audience through using an informal voice and catchy headings that make her piece easy to read and understand, as well as by using both pathos and logos. However, a lack of ethos and meaningful, reliable support for her claims ultimately undercuts the success of her message. So notice that the conclusion, the ultimate opinion of the writer here, is that she is not successful in her communication because there's a lack of ethos and a lack of meaningful, reliable support for her claims. And those weaknesses in her communication ultimately are strong enough as weaknesses that it undercuts the overall success of her message. So the stance or the opinion of the writer in this rhetorical analysis is that Catherine Alice's article is not ultimately successful. And notice the specific rhetorical elements that are identified that this writer plans to talk about. So one thing she does is very clearly identifies that Alice's purpose is to persuade. So there's an important word here about persuasion, and that's a purpose of the article. There's also a reference to informal voice and catchy headings. So those are rhetorical strategies, the way a writer uses the text in order to draw the reader in, and how those qualities make the piece easy to read and understand. We also hear that the writer will be talking about the use of pathos, a rhetorical appeal, and logos, another rhetorical appeal. There's also a mention here of ethos, yet another rhetorical appeal. So this writer plans to address all three rhetorical appeals in the analysis. And finally, we have a mention of the kind of support for claims, which is a very important part of a rhetorical communication, providing good support for your claims. And this writer is arguing that there's a lack of those meaningful and reliable support for the claims. So several different rhetorical strategies and rhetorical elements that will be discussed in the essay. And now I want to really look at how the structure of the thesis really leads the reader to know what to expect in the structure of the essay. So the first thing that we have in the essay is the summary of the article. And this is important as one of the first things your reader gets to read after the introduction, because the summary of the article provides enough context and information about the article that we can then better understand the rest of the rhetorical analysis. So having that summary come first after the introduction is important. And then notice we have what's called a topic sentence here that identifies the main emphasis and purpose of this paragraph. Alice's tone and style for the article is catchy and engaging, making her ideas easy to connect with and digest. I'm going to highlight this real quickly. And if I look back at the thesis, you'll see that we have this information in the thesis. informal voice, and catchy headings that make her piece easy to read and understand. So there we have a clear connection to the thesis and the first body paragraph. And notice that this is really the first important idea in the thesis, and it's also the first claim or the first important idea that is discussed in a body paragraph. So the rest of the paragraph then follows up on developing this idea. The next paragraph, if we look at this opening sentence, the topic sentence, first we have a transition that lets us know that we're getting another example. So beyond her effective use of title and headings, so we know that there's an additional point being made here about what she does effectively. We hear that she speaks directly to her readers in a friendly, easy style that her young readers can relate to. So again, I'm going to highlight this topic sentence. And again, if we look back at the thesis, so here we have informal voice, and that is exactly what this paragraph is talking about, a friendly, easy style. So we have that informal voice expressed in different language, but that's the same idea from the thesis being picked up now in this paragraph. And now this paragraph is going to develop that specific idea of the rhetorical strategy of how the author is using language. The next paragraph, again, we have a transitional word here, another, so that we know that we're adding yet another example to the mix. Another appeal that Alice relies on is logos. She hopes to appeal to the reader's need for facts and logical information. And notice that we have this phrase, hopes to, suggesting that maybe she's not successful at it. And the next sentence follows up and makes the claim about how this writer has assessed the article. However, here, however, she is not as successful because even though she does refer to and provides links to studies and sources of information, some of the sources for her information are outdated or in a foreign language. So these two sentences together really are the topic sentence here for this paragraph. And again, if we look back at the thesis, we will see that we're talking about the lack of meaningful, reliable support for her claims. So again, a very direct connection to the thesis and what the writer is talking about in the thesis gets developed in this body paragraph. Oh, in this body paragraph. And finally, we have a paragraph about her ethos, how she damages her ethos when she does not use sources effectively. As well, she makes several broad and unsupported claims that further damage her trustworthiness. So here we have further development of the information and the ideas about her lack of ethos and how she damages her ethos. And if we look back at the thesis, we see that it's connected to this information here, a lack of ethos. So that's the part of the thesis that's being developed in that part of the essay. So I notice that we have here her use of pathos and logos. And so I'm wondering, I can't remember now where, I think the writer does talk about the use of pathos and logos. And let's look, I'm scanning through the paragraphs here. Here we go. In this paragraph where we're looking at the friendly, easy style that her young readers can relate to, we hear about this, we get examples of her conversational, friendly style of writing. And then the writer here makes the connection that that friendly conversational style is an effective use of pathos, getting the reader to enjoy certain feelings and kind of then shifting how the reader feels about it and how this writer is using language. So this is the connection to how the writer is using pathos. And so that part of the thesis has been addressed. And then the next paragraph does talk about logos, so that also gets discussed. And then the final conclusion ultimately undercuts her message. I'm going to highlight that part of the thesis. So that part of the thesis is really emphasized in the paragraph here, the overall look at evaluating this source and its credibility. We have the final conclusion that it's not credible, appropriate source for becoming informed. So we have that connection back to the thesis again and a restatement of this writer's final conclusions about the source. And then we have the conclusion that restates the thesis, re-emphasizes the main points being made throughout the essay. And once again, we could probably go through and highlight the different elements in this conclusion and connect them back to that thesis to show that the essay has really come full circle. But it's important with your own piece of writing that you can make these connections between each of your body paragraphs and your own thesis. And a good way to double check it is to do exactly what I've done here, to highlight the main idea for each body paragraph, the topic sentence for each body paragraph, and then go back to your thesis and highlight where does your thesis mention that idea. And can you see those connections? Can you find those connections all the way through your essay between your thesis and your body paragraphs? So I hope this video helps you really start to think more deeply about and understand more fully the kind of thesis you need to write for your rhetorical analysis and how that thesis really provides you a template or a structure for the rest of your essay to make sure that it's clearly organized and well focused all the way through. All right, thanks everyone.